Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Omkar Nikam, the founder and CEO of Access Hub. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome to our new podcast, Nexus, the new voice powered by Access Hub. After the success of the Space, Defense, and Security podcast, we're taking the conversation further. Nexus is where industries intersect from space, defense, maritime, aviation, energy, and media broadcasting technologies. We bring you the insights, strategies, and stories shaping tomorrow's world all in one place. This isn't just new podcast, it's your connection point to the future. This is Nexus. Let's dive in. Thank you very much and enjoy the episodes. Hello and welcome to the part two of this episode. We left the conversation with Neha Mishra at the point where we were discussing about how the actual pathway is carved into this industry sectors and how it is important to know and grab some of the mentors in this industry as well. Now we'll be taking a bit more deeper dive into the aspects of the sectors as well as the networking part, and then finally what Neha as a individual thinks about all these issues that are going on in the terms of educations and what she thinks might be the potential pathway for students and researchers who would like to step into this domain. Without any delay, I would like to directly start with the questions. Neha, yeah, coming back to the questions, I would like to know for someone coming from literature, history, or philosophy background, uh, what's the best way to build credibility, subject matter knowledge in such specialized sectors from your perspective?
Hi everyone. First of all, back to this, and I'm happy that
Yes.
we're continuing this again. For me, to gain the credibility, as I was mentioning in my previous answers, also is obviously the consistency. Um, for the credibility thinking, people mostly think, okay, I have a degree in masters, I am a PhD, I'm a doctor or something. This is mostly speaking about my credibility in my sector or a subject. But my thinking has changed really. I was also in my masters this person. Credibility is not only about having a degree. It's mostly understanding how you can use that learning into the real life, and how you can position yourself, your background as an asset for the world. When I was in my masters, I used to think, oh, okay, I have to score this much, I have to get this much. If I will get this much credit, I will get this future or that future. But by by end semester of my masters, I realized my some of my basic concepts were not very clear. I was like, if even having a 70 or 80% of marks, if you don't have your concept clear, if you don't know how you can use that learning of in the university outside in the real world, that means you don't have the credibility. So to gain the credibility, the major step is to make your learning visible. Reading is fine, you read, it is your private learning growth. But to make yourself visible as well, how you will make yourself visible? Write more, make it public. Start with short forms like op-eds, blog posts, or policy briefs. And even people nowadays, I have seen, share thoughtful kind of updates on LinkedIn. People share them because they are your own form of opinion or perspective on a
Yes.
on anything, right? So people kind of relate to those who put themselves out and share those understanding. And obviously you might have some limits in your analysis in initial time, but you will learn with those, you will get feedbacks from people. But to gain the credibility, you have to take the risk, you have to start building that in yourself. For instance, when I started writing, I was doing my internship. I I sorry, I was in Institute of Chinese Studies, and I used to think I write very well. And I had a mentor, and she gave me my first review comments on my first article, and it was all red marked. And I was like, oh my god, I don't know how to write. And it was a real, reflection on myself, that I have to work on myself a lot. And I think this was the starting when I started learning the criticisms are good. But and in academics you have to be very very patient with the criticisms. You can't be like, okay, I can't take it. You have to put that ego aside and work on your work on your skill to gain that future credibility in the field. And if you think about philosophy, IR people or pol science people background, you have to understand the knowledge gap in the field. Only then you can bring that credible image of yourself. People will look after, okay, this person is bringing something which is known, but with the perspective is very different, the analytical skill is very different, the approach, the methodology is different. So major thing is, just make yourself visible, make things different only by doing things, instead of just waiting for things to happen. And that can happen only when you are ready to make mistakes, you are ready to take criticisms openly and work on the feedbacks very seriously. So that's how I feel I have gained credibility. Right now I won't be saying I have enough to just be like, okay, I have enough, I will continuously working on them. So yeah, that's what I feel.
No problem. Yeah, I would like to now, step into that. I would say an example, because I think you have mentioned a lot about the credibility. So I believe the biggest example is like you as well as me right now over here. But apart from that, also I'd like to have few more examples from your side. Could you share an example of a non-STEM professional who made a big impact in defense or international relations? What can we learn from their journey as well?
So non-STEM person, I can give you good examples of famous people first,
Yeah.
and then maybe I can give you the people I have seen in person. For
Yes.
instance, I always come back with an example of Shiv Shankar Menon. He was India's former national security advisor and foreign secretary. He didn't come from an engineering background or technical background at all. As far as I know, he studied history, and he went on to shape some of India's most important foreign and security politics. And think about it, he was at the heart of India US civil nuclear deal negotiation. He played a key role in government decisions during multiple events. And what made him effective was not his non-technical expertise, but mostly the background he came from, and how he used that background as an asset in the field. And there are so many names. I think the UN Secretary Kofi Annan was there. He was from non-technical background, but he was there representing UN Security Council. So these are the big names which we all know. But in my personal experience, I have seen. Mentioned about Dr. Manpreet Sethi. She is the nuclear expert in Center for Air Power Studies. She's not from the technical background. She is not from the defense background as such, but she has made her name in a field, nuclear. And wherever she goes, she talks to, she gives lectures to defense experts, defense people, squadron officers as well, who really look after, who really look forward to know the her analysis, her viewpoint on the
Yes.
nuclear issues. So I think her name is mostly I have really come close and to work together with her. So I think people don't have to just be from a technical expertise background or something to make their name in defense. But it takes time. Only thing is, you have to be patient. Because I know her. She has been in this journey from last more than 20 years, and today the world wants her. The world invites her to be the speaker, to be there in her in their conferences, in their events. So but the only thing she did was consistent in her interest, and today she has that credibility with her. So I feel, for me, I have right now only this example. Maybe I can come back with more in later, but yeah, this is what I feel mostly. And I myself think myself as an example. I'm not an expert right now, I'm not a big name, but I have done and developed myself in this field. So if I can do, you can do as well.
Absolutely. I believe you have mentioned all the heavy lifters over here. And yeah, Neha, I think you are a great example. As I mentioned that, you and me, we both are an example as well. But I suppose I also do not consider myself as a, kind of an hell lot of an expert in this segment, because it's been just 10 years that I've been working. But I have seen like the kind of, personalities that you mentioned, these people are in the industry since past 2 3 decades. But I would like to mention this fact about Neha, that I have always appreciated her when she was working at Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. I have always seen that she was one of the leading ladies of India, representing the country at such a level. Because I have never seen Indian representation residing in France for past 8 years. I have met several Indian delegation, and hardly I have seen women in this role, where the defense, especially when it comes to strategic decision making. I was really happy to see that women like Neha are now stepping into these roles, and the government is also providing such opportunities. So thanks to both the government as well as individuals like Neha, who are setting an example, uh, where the defense has primarily a male dominated industry, I would say, or a sector, and having women as a decision maker or a strategic in a strategic role makes a lot of difference. I mean, that's a complete different discussions. I am of this thought that historically, if women were in these roles historically in the defense, I think the war or the violence would have been bit more lesser, I would say. Because there's a certain aspect, if you analyze the history of the world, whether it's India, whether it's Europe, whether it's US, and especially if you see the COVID times, if you analyze the COVID times, uh, the women prime minister and the presidents of the countries, the countries which had women prime minister or the president were the ones which were doing great. Now, I'm not saying that that is the only factor that is coming in, but somewhere I believe women always have 1% more edge when it comes to strategic decision making. Men are a bit more emotional, I would say. A lot of times, the emotional triggering factor is something that shouldn't interfere ever with your decision making. And male,
I
yeah, yeah, Neha,
Yeah,
proceed, yeah,
I have something to add here
yeah,
actually, and actually you kind of touched the right spot here.
yeah,
So so
yes,
when I was in SIDM, I think when I entered, and
yes,
I was just learning how to represent myself and everything.
yeah,
I was a silent observer in initial months, and in those months I somebody told me that as a women in this field, you have to be like, whenever you are speaking, you have to be 100% right, because people don't take women seriously in this field. And it really affected me. I was like, this is not right. Even if a women even if a man can state a wrong fact, and he can be fine with it, but if a woman is saying, then obviously people are thinking, okay, she already doesn't know anything about defense, so it's fine if she's making a wrong fact or something. So from that onwards, I was very determined that if whenever I'm going to open my mouth in public, I should know things, otherwise I'll stay silent. But thankfully I never had to face that embarrassment. I worked on whenever I used to meet, I used to go to policy discussions in Ministry of Defense. I used to represent SIDM at the table, and came with all the homework, share the details, and also have discussion, understand better. And whenever I used to go out with a delegation, as you all rightly said, the full delegation was with men and I was the only women. and I never used to feel, the men never made me feel okay, you're the only woman, okay, let her not feel very much, part of this. But they were very very welcoming about it, and the men always appreciated me for this, that you are really really inspiring to be there and to lead these. And I have so many names who really made me going, who really made me realize my worth, okay, I can do it. And I think it was just the time I took around 10 delegation to 10 countries, and I really felt proud. I was part of those, and every country I used to learn something, and every country used to, some people used to encourage me that you're coming from India, taking this big delegation alone as women. So these things used to make me feel good, but at the same time I used to feel, okay, maybe I wish there must be more women in this. I would have more people
Yeah.
to relate to and understand how they feel. So maybe in future things will change. But yeah, it was a journey, and I think in defense sector, industry, or forces, the men are very very supportive for women to enter into this field. But unfortunately we still have to go a long way. But I hope it will come soon.
Absolutely, I believe the change has started with individuals like you. So I hope, in the coming years things will flourish for sure. Following with the kind of, same thing, because we're talking about the challenges briefly. So from your perspective, what are some common challenges humanities graduates face when entering these fields, and how can they adapt their mindset to overcome them? I mean, one of the challenge we spoke about, the gender thing. Other challenges, you can briefly mention it now as well.
So I think the mostly one challenge is also about the perception, uh, as I explained, that people assume that we are coming from this field, so we cannot go, and which is obviously right, because they don't know, they don't have the people around them to tell them. And that is why we are here, and we will be guiding people from the humanities background to understand there is a scope. And I think when I came in Center for Air Power Studies, then I got to know that, okay, I could also join Air Force. I had the scope to join as a woman. I never had this idea because nobody in my family was in army or any military background was there. So I was very happy that I could. But then when I realized, I was already out of the age bracket. So that is the thing, that people realize things, people understand, but it kind of, it is sometimes late. So I feel the perception needs to be right. And even if you think there are the scenic schools and those the places where people get trained and develop those skills to go for the final exam, I don't think that requires always to be from the technical background only. It requires more of you to prepare yourself, train yourself. So mainly the perception needs to change. Even if you started in a different sector, you can still go into that the other sector. Only you have to think, you have to do as I said, work on yourself, develop those skills, speak to right people, understand the right requirement. So to overcome the limit or limitation is now today we have everything in our hand. You have AI, you have Google, you can just research everything and you will have everything in your hand. I think when I was in school, I was in we didn't have that I feel very old saying it, but I think, yeah, we didn't have those skills or things to look after, and our parents didn't know how to even explore those things. So today everyone has that access to the right knowledge. But we the only thing, we have to use it right way. It's not like just depending on it, okay, AI can help me to write things, AI can help me to do things. You have to make the right use of AI for your better future. So it's not wrong to use it, but only thing is overcoming your limitation is walking or running with the right pace or with the time growth. So if time is growing with the AI acceptance, you have to also do the same. Just overcome those limitation of your side. Okay, I will just do the word document kind of writing. I won't explore or go further of that. People used to do literature review initially. They used to go to library, bring those books down and just read it. Now then things change. We had journal articles available online. We had different sources to
Yes.
get the PDFs without going to the libraries. So now things are changing. So you have to adapt to the changes and work on yourself. And I don't think there is any limit you cannot cross then.
I totally agree. You mentioned about that feeling old part. I mean, it's been almost 12 years now. I passed out of bachelor's. It's not even 2 decades. And I already feel really old because the kind of things that I'm doing right now are exactly the same things the Gen Z is doing at the age of 18 or 19. Because things have extremely accelerated, we really didn't had the AI and anything. I think the Instagram and all these things itself have grown like since past half a decade. I mean, even the
Exactly.
content and everything was also not there. The communication, simplification of the education, the kind of things that we are talking right now to the podcast, this midterms were not even available for us. We had to basically go for a ground networking. And that's where my next question is coming for you, Neha. Is that how important is networking in breaking into defense and IR, and where should newcomers be looking for mentors and professional communities from your perspective? I have a thought about events, but yeah, I'll first let you answer your thing and then I'll add on to it for sure.
So I think I can say without any hesitation that networking plays a very big role in your field, especially in defense and IR. Why? Because both the fields are relationship driven. You could be brilliant in your research, you could be brilliant in your writing, but if no one knows you or your work, how this is, how it even exists, it might be stay there online, less people know about it, even if you have the quality to deliver to the world. Most of the opportunities are available there. As you said, you will be coming back with the event thing, but I think when you go in any events like conferences or workshops or anything, what people mostly do, they focus on talking to maybe same age of people, or maybe just stay with their friends. Okay, you are my friend, let's stay together and attend and go home. So this is fine, but at the same time you have to have the right eye to know the right kind of people in that room. Because yeah, here you came to see not only the event and the deliveries or lectures or speeches. You are here to understand and know people also. Otherwise you could attend the online session as well, right? So if you are there, just scan through the room and see which kind of people would be the right people to talk to. And talking to people kind of sometime open things which you don't even know about. So and networking, for me, if I will give you my example, when I was always proactive about networking. I used to do cold emails to people. Okay, if I have known, I met you, you gave me my card. So sometimes people give you card, they don't even remember you. But I used to cold email everyone that you met me and this is what I do, blah blah blah. And then sometimes they never used to reply, sometimes they did used to reply, and which whoever used to reply always opened doors for me. So there is one time when there was a rare earth global conference happening in Spain, Barcelona. And I was in center for our studies. I was a student, obviously I had no money to go Spain and do attend conference. But it was on rare earth and I was very very fascinated. I want to go. And you could say it is as a manifestation or something. But I was very sure that I want to go, but it was a highly chargeable registration fee around 900 euros. I was like, how will I go? But then I wrote to the secretary general of the organization that this is what I do, this is what I have, and but I don't have the money. I want to attend, and this is what my work is. Thinking I will get the reply, and imagine after a week I got the reply. I got the reply from him saying that we accept and we can waive off your fee, and we can also give you some minimal support money to travel. Only thing, you have to support us as a volunteer for the conference report writing. I was like, sure, I will be happy to. And I wrote to them, and I did whatever visa process, everything. And it was my first ever international travel for a conference sponsored. So it is something, if I would never tried it, I would never got it. And this person, he was so happy with me that also opened a next door. He wrote one co-author chapter with me for a recent book, India, Japan, and Beyond. It was the book by JNU professor Shabini Chaudhary, and my chapter was on India Japan rare earth element partnership. So he was my co-author, and he kept me as the first author of the chapter. So this is what networking means. I'm just giving you one example, but I have done so much like this, and every time the networking has helped me more than my hard work in anything. So this is what I'm saying. Keep nudging people. I know it is kind of embarrassing sometimes. You may feel okay, people might not like it, but sometimes they might come back. If not, there is no loss, you're not losing anything. But if they will, you are gaining a lot. So just my thing is, in this field you have to be very proactive to know the right people. Because whenever you're going to in going in a room, just make a case that you will go back at least with one network today, one relation today, and then that's for you, that's all for you with every event. So that's what I feel.
Excellent. I think you have covered most of the part. I would like to add regarding the events. What Neha has mentioned is extremely important. That a lot of conferences which are happening, most of them have a lot of higher fees, uh, and I have some criticism for the conference people as well. Not everyone can basically afford. So at least for students, at least waive off the fee or keep it so minimal that the students can afford it. I think this is a part of discussion for maybe another complete episode on how to basically network in the events, because there is a whole lot of things to explore and kind of dissect on that part. But I'd like to mention over here a lot of people, especially have seen some of the people from my generation as well. Currently, also they do the same thing, and they were doing the exact same thing when they were student as well, like 13 years ago. And I see some of the people, not so much. I don't see this much kind of, I would say, a bit of a ground of arrogance or ego in the Gen Z is like open to basically do everything. But still I see some of the people who are coming from possibly the mid level cities, tier 2 cities, and then entering the metro cities. They kind of feel that okay, if you're at this position, that might be this level of thing, you should walk and talk in that way. I believe until and unless you're in a position where you're commanding and things are happening, you shouldn't basically take your pride and ego to that level, because pride and ego never helps you go anywhere. And especially if you're in the non-technical domain where the relationship development is extremely important, ego and arrogance will never help you in this sector to network. And I would like to quote this from a movie called Red Sparrow, which is primarily headed as basically marketed as a female spy, and Jennifer Lawrence is playing one of the lead roles. And over there, the Russian spy school teacher tells her, "The pride are the first to fall in intelligence." And we are talking about defense, which is also overlaps with the intelligence community as well, because intelligence also has a deep rooted applications through humanities. So this line really remained with me when I watched that film back like almost half a decade ago. Is that the pride really, like, hell kind of triggers you to fall down. It creates a kind of a downfall chain of yours, and along with you everything else that is in your surrounding. So I feel when you're networking, go in a kind of a freehand way. If someone is talking with you bad in a bad way, or in a rude manner, I would say just think of it as a bad dream and let it go. Because if you keep grudges over there, you will be at the loss. Because remember this one thing, that tomorrow when you're at a top position, you are still going to meet that person. I guess this world is very small. You're going to keep on, especially, and I'd say the defense community, the sector is very niche. Coming from a space industry background, I feel space is even a niche industry. So you cannot ruin the relationship with the people. This is a very small community. So make sure that even if you face any kind of course, when it comes to self-respect, you're free to take the way stand you want it, but generally try to keep the ground neutral as much as possible from your end. Because I have observed a lot of times people bring their pride and ego in between, and that really ruins off everything else. So this is my suggestion for the people, that try to develop the relation as much as possible. And even if you face some bad, in which I believe I have faced, even I'm 100% sure Neha, you would have also faced some of the incident, one of which you mentioned from the SIDM days as well. uh, so I believe even if such incidents happen, just let it go. Think of it as a bad dream and focus on what good you can bring out of the networking. That's what I'd like to mention. If you'd like to add Neha onto this, you can add to it. This,
Exactly. I think, yeah, you rightly added, and I think this line is going to be with me also, the pride thing which you mentioned.
yeah,
So I feel, yeah, having the pride is fine. You should be proud of you, but not to the extent that, oh, this is going to affect or limit your learning journey. So for me, I'm the sector head of the team, but even today I don't feel okay. I am everything, I should not do this. I am always open to do more things which are not even coming in my responsibilities, because I feel okay, even if I will do, I will learn more. And next time I can make other person learn. Otherwise, if I don't know, how will I tell the other person how to do that? So just be open. And initial journey, there's a line which I should not use. People should not feel offended, that beggars should not be the choosers,
I
which
agree. I back this.
so when I was in my masters, one of my professors said it, that when you're in your initial journey, don't be a chooser. Okay, I want to do this, I want to do not do that. Obviously, it should not be like different, very different from the thing you want to do. But it should not be like, okay, this is not something of my status or my standard or something like this. So you should just be open and accept what is coming on your way. And I think that is all. You will have more opportunities coming than anyone. So that is what I did, and I know you have also done the same. So this is what I will tell whoever is listening today, that you should also do the same in your life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. Perfect. I think that's a beautiful way you have put it up. Uh, Proceeding with the further part of the episode, I'd like to come to the resources now. I think one of the primary resources we just spoke about, that is events for the networking. So, from your perspective, which resources, primarily either it's books, courses, or events we have spoken all about, do you recommend
Hmm.
to humanities students to deepen their understanding of defense and IR?
So for me, for IR, I feel when you're in your graduation, undergraduation, post graduation, and all the degrees when you have, mostly we just do read all the books or articles, whatever is assigned to us, we read it as just to pass the exam and be done with it. So those are not just for the exam sake. It is basically to build your conceptual base that strong, that you can understand more theories, more kind of concept in future. So if you are not going to build that, it is obviously going to affect you. So first thing, I would say, just try to keep all those with you, even for the future, and read it whenever you have the reference in time. You want to just, for example, you have Mia Shemer's book, or you have uh, you want to go into the political theory, so you're going to Rousseau's book, or you want to read Plato's. So all those, I'm just giving you the examples. I'm very very bad in remembering the book names. So but the only thing what I think, I keep a drive folder with me always of those important articles, important books which I read, but after some time you forget what this article was about, and what this scholar, or what this theoretician, or academic thinker said about. So you can go back. I don't have to look after and on Google it, or find the right copy. So that is one kind of thing, and keep adding to that. That is your online library. And also, in addition, appreciate the for hard copies. Now today, even people don't buy hard books, they just buy the soft copies, or get the access to multiple. Libgen is there, Sci-Hub is there, we all know that too. From there we get access, and we read it, and we are done with it. So maybe having some copies gives you more access to read, and mark the traditional way of doing it, the way we used to do it. This is one way. And then there are multiple books which are more empirical in concept, like uh, we have so many books by Jaishankar, our external minister. We have books by Shashi Tharoor, which I recently read, and I don't remember the name. But these are some of the example. Our
Yes.
foreign external foreign former foreign secretaries, they have also Sri Shankar Menon's book are there. So these are mostly on IR. If you want to go into defense, there are so many magazines or think tanks which come up with their yearly journals, or quarterly journals, which addresses the main concepts, like nuclear, or any blue, so they or aerospace journey, or maritime journey. So those things, what is going on, the growth is there. Or also, there is a platform at and in on Google. This is in Indian Defense Research Wing, IDRW, where you can just see every day they put up so many short articles to understand what is going on in the defense sector. So you can just read those. I have made a kind of a habit. I read their newsletter every day to keep myself updated what is going on. Obviously, it's like 4 or 5 pages, sometimes you miss it, but it gives you some basic a base, because both the fields, IR and defense, are ongoing fields. Every day something is going on. Today we are talking, we know what is happening between India and China. Things are happening between India and US, and the geopolitics, the geoeconomics, everything is changing every day. So we have to be stay updated, but at the same time keep yourself rooted in the right theories, right understanding of those concepts, so that you can bring those theories into the real empirical ongoing
Yes.
situation, so that when you're writing, you are not disconnected from the main concepts. People will appreciate when you will have those ability to connect those two dots. So I would say, just you will know better which kind of books you want, which kind of books you like.
Absolutely.
You have to just understand which is your field. So for me, I would say that I won't be the right person to give you the right book right now. If I am in rare earth, if you are in rare earth, feel free to come to me. I'll be happy to give you the right books. But if you are indifferent, so maybe you can come to me. I can look for you, but mostly you can realize your field, and find out the right books. It's all available. It's all the access is there, as I said. So
Yes.
yeah, just keep working on your basics, and keep updating with the right updates and news, and just read things every day. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this is also again a topic I'm taking notes on how much more we can go in depth to dissect these things. Resource is something that these days it's very important to differentiate uh, between the information. Especially, there are three kind of information. One is the fake one is the moderately manipulated one, and the other one that is the actual real meat, that is our ground data. It is very difficult these days to interpret what is what. um, and I believe this can be discussed in a separate podcast, because of course we read books for a deeper base of the knowledge, but on day to day basis, when we are consuming the content, just like our podcast, and we also have our Access Hub news website, um, it is very important that which kind of news resources you are trying to follow, because a lot of times these days, I believe, especially in India and staying abroad in France for past almost 8 years now, I follow First Post, because I believe that's the possibly the only channel at the moment which has really no deep rooted agenda as such. It really comments and talks to the point about the global issues, especially, I would say, if you really want to be at a top notch level in global and IR, First Post is the channel you should go ahead with, especially because they report in English as well. So the international news are really quite reported in a great manner. But other news channels, I'm not really sure how and which will be the right one. It all depends on what kind of research you'd like to take it out. So it is very important that, especially when it comes to the online research and the resources which most 80% of your research for the student and research scholars these days comes from the online thing. We need to possibly host a separate conversation or a podcast episode on this, on how to basically spot this kind of things. I would like to mention about Ground News, ground.news. It's a website where you get to see the percentage of where the news is leaning. It's leaning towards left, right, or is it neutral reported. So this kind of, I just know only one resource, but definitely when Neha and me we speak about this topic in depth in our upcoming episodes, we'll try to bring in more resources for such things, because I believe differentiating between the information is extremely tough. I feel it extremely tough even after working for 10 years. So I'm 100% sure the new people will be finding it very tough to spot on which is the genuine piece of news or the piece of information.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
think you're right. I also follow the First Post mostly, and yeah, mostly for me the news, right news is when you don't have any. It's mostly the analytical
absolutely. Yeah.
analysis of the real
Yes.
updates. It should not be coming to a conclusion or
Yes.
giving you the extra
Yes.
information. We all know how our TV news is all about. So I
Yeah.
never go to TV news. I never. If you want to read, you read the newspaper. The Hindu is there, which I really appreciate. You have the opinion articles, but the opinion articles, those expert articles, you read them, but you
Yes.
have your own analysis added. As I mentioned in my previous answers also, that humanity's skill is mostly about connecting the dots,
Yes.
understanding all the perspectives, so but come up with your own perspective as well. Don't just follow, okay, this is given, okay, this is my perspective. So you are rightly saying that this is a difference which we have to create, and we can totally do it in our future segments. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I think we are reaching the final part of this episode. We have covered several points, and I believe there's still a lot of information that we need to provide answers to. I think Neha and me will be drafting accordingly the series of episodes in the upcoming weeks. But prior to that, to close this part two of the episode, Neha, this question is up to you completely. You can answer it the way you want it. Looking ahead, how do you see the role of humanities trained professionals evolving in defense, international relations, over the next decade? I would like to mention intelligence as well, but that's not the topic we have kept on the table for now. Uh, because I feel, coming from that part of the world where we have worked on espionage cases in the space industry, I feel the defense and international relations at the end becomes a conical shaped laser sharp focus for intelligence, because one intelligence can basically change the history of the nation or the course of the nation. So IR and geopolitics is at the end, intertwined with the intelligence. I would like to cover that also, but yeah, if you are fine to answer the question to cover defense, intelligence, and IR together, that's fine. Otherwise, just focus on defense and IR for this question. Yeah, please proceed ahead.
Sure, thank you. So, what I think in the humanities, people have obviously a really good career coming in defense and IR. As you asked about intelligence part, I would say even in intelligence, because intelligence is not only about as we have seen the perspective or the side in movies. Okay, this is the only intelligence part we know. It is the other part also. There is
Yes,
intelligence analyst, which there is geopolitical intelligence as well, geospatial intelligence, geographical intelligence, so many. And then if not only in those, there are people now, intelligence is coming in other fields as well. The security field has also intelligence and an analyst. So I have some of my friends who there is an organization called Max Security. People work there who are from humanities background, but they are working as intelligence analyst and getting trained, understanding everything, and they are very good in that. So that is one part which I know hardly about intelligence, career, which I think you might know more about it. You can shed the light. And for defense and IR, I think as I mentioned, there are multiple roles: policy analysts, program managers, and so relationship managers, and so on. And there are so many defense industries in India right now. More than if you I have heard like more than 12,000. And those one every industry, every private company, or in DPSU, in public sector you can't go, but private ones, they always need people who can join them and lead these kind of roles, because no, those are not technical roles. And the technical people always go for the technical engineer ones, won't go for a HR role, or won't go for a program manager role. So there you have the real fit to come in and make the
yes,
right choices. And there are people, the international representatives also, who sometimes people companies prefer the marketing or MBA background, but sometimes they also want person who has a right command or knowledge how to talk to people and make that relationship right. So for me, humanities people are going to have a big career coming in this field. The only thing is there is a slow growth, but we are here with this initiative. I think this is going to help people and understand how what more they can do and adapt to this. There are so many initiative going on recently. When I was in SIDM, so the AICTE also signed one MOU with SIDM, where they will be launching some certificate courses or degree courses for people in to train them for future career roles in defense industries. Mostly they were technical ones, BTech and others, but they will come back with the other forms as well. So if even the these kind of association or institutions which are government based understands the value, how they can train the future generation to come and fill the roles which are required. And they are not being transparent, they're not being being just partial towards the technical sector. They are also understanding the value of the non-technical humanities background people. So just for this, I feel the next decade is going to obviously see more people coming in this. The only thing is there is more requirement of awareness, and the awareness comes with more knowledge about it, more research about it, and also taking more risk to enter into the field. But if you are going it, there is no going to be stop for you. You're going to shine and rise, obviously. So that's, I feel that if I have
yes,
done last I have been in this defense sector from last 4 years, 5 years, I think. And if I can be a sector in a sector head in 5 years, so I don't think I don't understand other people cannot do, because I feel I consider myself as the most less educated or knowledgeable person. But if people can come and understand the value of it, you can really really shine it. And yeah, that's all I feel. I'm very very happy if people can take something away from it and can start trying for it, and I will be happy to support you and take you in the right direction.
Absolutely. I believe there is a lot to explore on the career path, especially I think how the defense, international relations, and geopolitical knowledge base converge together to basically give birth to sector expertise like the intelligence. And as Neha said, intelligence is not something what you have seen in the films. There are private firms as well, even companies like Infosys, Oracle. These are just the software giants, but there are even companies like Uber as well. Uber is an excellent example of insider risk management. So there is a thing called as insider risk management, which is called as IRNM sometimes. Over there also geopolitical expertise, international relations are extremely important. It is nothing but tracking the corporate espionage, and over there the strategic decision making, who are the people working in an organization, how to keep the surveillance on them, and what kind of threats your organization might have, especially if you're in the international market. So intelligence also has a different facets, I would say, and I think Neha has already touched upon that part of research analyst. So here also I think the role begins from the research analyst only. But Neha, I think this is a good point to note that in the coming weeks we should cover also on this fact how defense, international relations, geopolitics converge to basically give birth to uh, possibly roles in the intelligence domain as well as in the private sector too. Because I think there is a kind of a taboo that people feel that the intelligence people only work with the government. No, it's not that kind of thing anymore. There's a whole lot of private sector that is hiring as well, including the software companies. So especially the tech people, we're talking about the tech domain. So the tech people are extremely hungry to hire, I would say, inside risk managers or the IR people, because the tech people are not aware about what is going on in the world and why it is going on, but the justification part can be given by the IR people, and that's the reason they are in that company to basically protect it from any kind of loss or theft. But yeah, definitely we'll jump into this conversation in the coming weeks for sure. So yeah, Neha, as usual, it was great speaking with you on both these episodes. I hope the audience enjoys this episode. I'm 100% sure the way we received the great response for your episode like 1.5 years ago, it's going to be same or possibly even more, because now we have a lot more base. The podcast is now listened across 120 plus countries at the moment, and it has gathered over more than 30K listeners per month. So I'm pretty sure it's going to go to the right audience as well as it's going to explode a lot. So looking forward to more such conversations again. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And just wanted to add one thing here, that I have my page which we are going to tag humanities to
Yes.
defense. So wherever with this journey, when you have more questions to come in, we have more podcast series coming in. But whenever you would like to reach out to me or Omkar, please feel free to write to
Yes.
me or DM me. I'm going to be very very happy to support you and guide you forward. Thank you so much. Thank you, Omkar.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you find our podcast insightful, then please like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next episode. Thank you.